Welcome, welcome, welcome everyone to this amazing celebration of life for our beloved friend Myron McClellan. And you're going to hear from some people who were very close to him. Knowing Myron, he would be delighted that every single person is here because it was one of Myron's gifts that he made everybody feel like they were his most wonderful friend. He certainly tricked me that way, and a few others I see listed here too on the program. I met Myron 19 years ago, and at the time, I was in a very dark place. I didn't want to acknowledge it, but I was. And Myron, over the 19 years, our relationship evolved from started as he was my counselor, then he became my friend. I became a student of his, a mentee. He was my wonderful mentor. Then we did some wonderfully deep meditations together, and even though he was always in charge, he acted like I had something to do with it too. So, and I appreciate that. And at the very end, Myron was not just a friend or even one of my best friends. I would say that Myron was my best friend because there's nothing I couldn't tell Myron. He's the most non-judgmental person I've ever met. Lawrence, on the other hand, acknowledges that he isn't, but however, I want everybody, since this is a celebration, and Myron would be disappointed if he was watching and everybody was glum and feeling down, and he would want everybody to have a good time. And one of the things we're going to do is I'm going to encourage anybody, by the way, please turn your cell phones off right now, unless your cell phone sounds like this, in which case you'll get away with it. But these bells, you can ring anytime while any of us are talking. And you can ring it if you agree with what they're saying. You can ring it if you don't agree with what we're saying. You can ring it if you just feel like it. But you're going to each need to try it because they're not all the same. And so I feel a little silly saying, try to ring your bell, but you're going to want to do that just to make sure it works. So I get the honor of leading off here, and there were a lot of people who were beloved to Myron and considered him the same. At the end of our talk, Peg Eggers is going to introduce Myron's music, and then we're going to have a special talk by Rob McClellan, Myron's nephew, and Lawrence, and then we're going to serve champagne, and I get the honor of doing the toast. And when we serve champagne, there will be as part of the food you get, there'll be a little strawberry and a little chocolate on there. And the chocolates are similar, they're Ryzen, they're similar to the ones I plied Myron with frequently. I got to travel all over the world. I've been in lots of countries. I always remembered to bring something back for Myron and Lawrence. And it was never wrong to find the local chocolate and bring the local chocolate back. And that always seemed welcome. And we miss Myron. Let's face it, we miss Myron. I miss him terribly. People in this room do too. Myron is having a wonderful time. Myron gets to go on that next big adventure, and he and I talked quite a bit that there is a day coming when I would be here and he wouldn't, and what would that be like? And Myron said, I'll always be with you, and I knew that he meant it when he said it. I hope that wherever, whenever, however Myron is, I know Myron spiritually is having an incredible time. His spirit was so looking forward to the next transition. His 3D avatar, who loves all of us and really loves Lawrence, did not want to leave. But what you need to be aware is Myron was very ill, in and out of hospitals and structured nursing facilities a lot in the last couple years. And his equanimity was always wonderful. He was always happy to see visitors. He, of course, was the darling of all the staff people wherever he was. They all wanted to take care of Myron. But it was clear at the end with 2020 hindsight that Myron wasn't going to go do his transition in a hospital or in a nursing facility. He was going to do it at home. And he got home, and a week later we had to say goodbye, but he made it, and it was a wonderful, wonderful passing, a wonderful ceremony. There are so many things I would like to tell you about Myron, but Lawrence is going to give me the hook here if I go over my allotted time, and I'm a little paranoid about it. And I have 5 pages of notes here, and there's no way I'm going to get to all of that. In fact, I'm not going to get to much of it at all because I had eye surgery the other day, and for some reason this eye isn't working, and I can't read what my notes were. I just know they're here, so I'm keeping them here sort of for comfort, but they're not really doing me any good because I can't read them. But I'm going to give you a couple of highlights. Myron and I did a lot of very deep spiritual meditations and very profound and deep spiritual journeys. And I mentioned to you I was in a difficult place. I would not be standing here and the person I feel I am today were it not for my 19 years with Myron. He was easily one of the most significant people in my life and one of the most profound. And I'm a better person because I knew Myron. So we miss Myron. What does Myron miss? I would guess, I'm speaking for Myron, but Myron sort of taught me, talk to your guides, and I would visit with Myron, and I would say to Myron, usually at the end of our visit, what do my guides have to say, Myron? And he would sort of look off, get a very, very wise, profound look on his face, and then tell me something that was frequently just what I was thinking. And so I had to give credibility to what he was saying. He wasn't just putting me on because in some way he was tapped in on a deep psychological level. And but now that Myron has passed, I expect him to be one of the guides. And I'm looking forward to Myron corralling the guides and helping me with all that, since I no longer have Myron to interpret for me. What would Myron be missing? First of all, he'd miss the wonderful love, profound connection he had with everybody he knew, and that would include everybody in this room. And he misses that. I'm sure Myron also, and of course especially, misses the love of his life, Lawrence. And Myron misses sort of the adventure and the fun. Myron knew how to have fun in a very spiritual sense. The other thing Myron misses is chocolate. I know Myron misses chocolate because, as already indicated, it was always the gift that worked. I brought Lawrence and Myron a lot of things from all over the world, but I think they most appreciated the chocolate. And I know Myron did. And I think Lawrence has actually developed a little sweet tooth for chocolate as a result. So Myron misses also his music, the way he created. And I want to tell you something that happened to me. I was in the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, and I go in and they have a whole special section devoted to Rembrandt. And I went in and looked at the great Rembrandt paintings and all that. And then something said, turn around, turn around. I turned around and there was, quote, a portrait of the artist, self-portrait by the artist. And I turned and looked and I said, oh my God, that's Myron. That's Myron looking back at me. And Rembrandt was known for his deep, profound feelings that he could convey through light and dark in his paintings. And I honestly think among his other skills and gifts, Myron was in some way a Rembrandt reincarnation, or they were big pals because Myron had that same creativity with his music. And all I want to say about Myron's music is it was so profound. The first time I heard it, I didn't have words to describe it. And it gave me an appreciation, not just for his music, but for all music. And that was a gift he gave me that I will always be grateful for. So I'm pretty sure Myron has a lot of Rembrandt. There's a lot of Rembrandt in Myron and vice versa. And maybe Rembrandt was on painting, but Myron was certainly there with his music. And Myron, the last thing I'll say is that as we were bantering over dinner out on their patio on one of those beautiful summer nights in that beautiful garden that Lawrence created for Myron, and Myron really appreciated it. And if you've been there, spectacular, absolutely wonderful garden. So we were bantering and we were trying to decide what are each other's superpowers. And and one is Lawrence has, I think, two superpowers, a strong sense of fashion and design, which is, normal for a guy of his persuasion. And I would frequently, when Lawrence would compliment me on what I was wearing, I would say, it's not too gay, is it? And Lawrence would say, no, you'll get away with it in Colorado, but if you were in a bar in New York, they'd be hitting on you. And I said, oh, thanks. So when I walked in and Lawrence complimented this, I said, not too gay, is it? And to my surprise, he said, oh, it's really gay. The reason I bring that up is, thanks to Myron and Lawrence, Myron and Lawrence impressed me over the years as I got to know them as the most loving couple I've ever met, period. The most loving couple I know was Myron and Lawrence, and it was beautiful, it was profound. And Myron led an adventure to Brazil for a spiritual retreat, and we have a few people here that went on that, and it was wonderful. We had a great time, and it was a wonderful adventure in and of itself. And thanks to that, I met Gabe Eggers, who was our guide for that. Myron put it together, and Gabe Eggers, through Gabe Eggers, I met his family, especially his parents, Pete and Peg. Peg is going to be speaking, but the one thing I will say is, if Myron and Lawrence are the most loving couple I know, the Eggers family is the most loving family I know. So. And anyway, Lawrence is giving me the hairy eyeball, so, and he was serious. He said, Mark, I know you'll go over, but I'm going to be watching you. So I'm sure I went over, but thank you all for coming. I'm so glad I could lead this off, and I'm so glad that we are all here to celebrate the wonderful life of one of our very best friends, Myron. Jason, good luck. I hope you can read your notes.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm truly honored to be here with everyone celebrating Myron. I'm Jason. You might have just seen a funny picture of me when I was 9. Myron was my godfather. I think most of us have a godfather, but my godfather was the best godfather. As we're all gathered here to celebrate this wonderful man that we all loved, I just want to tell you our story. It's not the whole story, it's just a bit of it. One of the best gifts that Myron ever gave to anyone, he gave to me. The gift was simply manifest in a tradition wherein every Monday from the time I was 3 until somewhere around 15, Myron would pick me up from my folks' house and we would go hang out. We would go to Chuck E. Cheese or Funtastic Nathan's or the batting cages or my personal favorite, Idaho Springs Hot Springs. Myron even took me to a few Avalanche games when they first came to town. It was amazing. Now, there were plenty of hangs that were more mundane, going out maybe for Chinese food or helping me with my homework, or we would just kick the soccer ball together at the park. But let's be honest, the big fun memories tend to stick out. Every single Monday, no joke, the only lapse in regularity was when he went to Nepal to climb Everest, which was so cool. He would pick me up in his maroon Saab 900 with his cool driving gloves and hat and his perpetual sweaters. And as far as I was concerned, he was the epitome of cool, and he was my godfather. As you might imagine, the word godfather never quite felt like it fit right. And there was a clear dissonance between our relationship and its title. Myron would call me his godson, with the emphasis on the son, and he would call me his kid. I would tell everyone how I had 3 dads, my dad, my bio dad, and my godfather. We never really landed on a phrase that felt right. There's something different about a father from what we were. It's simpler for me to comprehend now that I'm a father than it was when I was a child. So much of the love of a father is about creating constraints and boundaries. Please use the potty, Nico. Please don't write on the walls. If a child is water, then a father is the bank of the river, helping to guide you safely onward, to channel your energy and strength, your peace and your rage towards a future. I remember that Myron was always my confidant, my trusted resource. If ever there were big, difficult things that I needed to process, it was Myron that I could discuss them with. When I needed to process why Jeffrey left, Myron was the only person who could ever give me the context I needed. And even in the hardest conversations, he would always bring in something to make me smile. He knew how to make me feel heard. He was my safe harbor. Myron loved me the way the sky loves the ocean. We adored one another. We were best friends. And man, oh man, did I ever look up to him. I mean, sure, his car was cool. But the more I learned, the older I grew, the more I admired him. I still brag about him every chance I get. He was a local food critic, a professor at Princeton, a composer who studied under John Cage. And in case you didn't know, he wrote a piece of music that was performed in a disembodied church with 2 walls in the woods. He had the musicians perform the piece sitting in trees and unseen out in the woods, such that the place became the performance. I mean, it literally doesn't get any cooler than that. And yet, somehow, he ended up in this tiny town of Evergreen, Colorado. He was there when I was born, and when my dad left, and when I was 2 or 3, and Myron decided that he would show up for me. I honestly never asked him why. It never occurred to me to ask. Maybe he was just a kind man who wanted to give my mom a break, or maybe he knew that we'd be friends. My therapist, in listening to stories of Myron and how important he's been in my life, asked if I'd ever heard the Celtic concept of anam cara. If you haven't, Let me read you a bit about it. Anam is an old Irish Celtic spiritual concept, usually translated as soul friend. Anam, soul, Cara, friend. But friend is too weak in the modern sense. It refers to a person with whom the boundary between inner lives becomes unusually permeable and honest. Historically, in early Celtic Christianity, an Anam Cara was often a spiritual companion or confessor, someone entrusted with the deepest interior parts of another person's life. The relationship was less hierarchical than priesthood and more mutual than mentorship. The core idea: certain relationships allow a person to become more fully themselves through being deeply seen. Not admired, not managed, seen. There's also an important philosophical layer. The Anam Cara is not merely emotionally supportive. They are someone who helps us reconcile the fragmented self. In your presence, I become more legible to myself. I know that I'm not the only person here who has felt that connection with Myron, but as I stand up here in his honor and in his physical absence and attempt to define our relationship again, I just want to say thank you, Myron, my third dad, my Anam Cara. I love you, Godfather.
Wow, that was beautiful. So heartrending. Thank you, Jason. Myron's heart was so huge that he had a spot reserved for every single one of us here. And he held us with beauty and grace and believed in us. And I am so glad that Myron is here with us with his huge heart today, enjoying his presence with us as we enjoy our presence with him. I had the pleasure and gift of spending many holidays and birthdays and celebrations with Myron and Lawrence. And part of what they loved was playing my flute. So I'm going to open the space for the next part of our celebration here with the flute.
Can you hear me okay, Lawrence? He was concerned. What a sea of beautiful faces. And I feel him. Do you feel him? I really feel him. I feel him through your flute. Myron, our magical, mystical minstrel, has left this world. It was time and he was ready, but having known and loved him for over 50 years, a tectonic plate in my life has shifted with his passing, and I must salute him with some sweet remembrances as he soars off into the great beyond. Myron was living in a little bungalow down on Birch Street in Denver when Peter and I met him back in the early 70s, even before we were married. I'm pretty sure it was Willie Matthews who introduced us. I remember Myron's wise, easy smile and a twinkle in his eye that said, "I'm a complex man of many appetites. And bottom line, God and I get along." I had no idea of his illustrious past, but was both intrigued and hooked. A musical prodigy, Myron played piano for the governor of West Virginia when he was 7 years old, then went on to study music at Wesleyan, where he was mentored and forever influenced by John Cage, the composer, who also studied Zen. After a stint teaching at Bucknell, Myron went on to earn an advanced degree at Princeton. In the late 60s, the Reverend Dr. Myron McClellan was hired at Princeton as a religion and philosophy professor. His scholarly acumen and message to be here now and question authority resonated to such an extent that his classes had to be held in the gymnasium. That's true, which in turn caused enrollment to drop for classes taught by the old guard. And for that reason, and possibly because he wore a cape at the podium, Princeton eventually let Myron go. He made his way to Denver, and at some point after Birch Street, moved to Evergreen. Worked as a most elegant wine steward and maitre d' at Kilgore Trout Restaurant, and started teaching. Peter and I were eager students. Many of us in this room were. His offerings on the Gnostic Gospels, Seth Speaks in the Gospel of John, helped us shape a belief system that transcended our upbringing and drew a group of us together to form what eventually became known as our tribe. He introduced us to psychic Corabelle, who told us the reason we all felt so close was that in a past life, we made plans to find each other this time around and be together. When our daughter Megan was diagnosed with hip dislocation at 13 months old, Myron told me I was response-able. I was not responsible. I could respond to her situation in a variety of ways, but her condition wasn't my fault. What a relief and revelation that was as we parented our daughter. Despite his deep academic knowledge and insight into new ideas, Myron often said that if we wanted our spirits to really break free, it was important to reconcile with our families of origin. Coming from a conservative West Virginia country doctor's family, he found his place back home by playing Christmas carols at his local church. In our 20s and 30s, he wowed our emerging adult minds with lessons like seek the magic in every moment. And things happen in life, but we decide how we react and what we do with them. In our response, we create our own reality. It wasn't long before Myron took his place as our tribal vicar. With fingers as capable as a craftsman and as delicate as petals, Myron was a maestro on the piano. His little tuxedo from his performance for the governor of West Virginia as a boy hung framed on the wall of his office. He taught piano and held numerous concerts in Evergreen and Denver. At first, he performed time-honored classics. Over the years, he composed and played more extemporaneously, straight from his heart to ours. I swear, his music lifted me into a boundless, timeless, tender zone. Our son Gabe was a baby when our friend Peter Howell died by fire at his home, a home where many of us have played and prayed and made plans for our shared future. Myron officiated at the celebration of his life and asked us what Peter had given us that we would carry into our future. For me, it was the word yes. Peter and Myron and our tribe taught me to say yes to as much as I possibly could, and I will for as long as I'm able. In 1980, Myron christened our second daughter, Mariah, in our backyard in the name of life, love, and all that is. He gently lifted her up for all to see in her heirloom christening gown, with the sun shimmering through her curls, and she reached her little arms out to embrace the moment and everyone in it. Peter and I were among the 500 guests who attended Myron and Libby's marriage on a glorious day in May in 1983. Grateful Dead lyricist John Perry Barlow officiated, and Peter was an usher. That was back when we had a mortgage and 2 jobs and 4 little ones. I admitted to Myron I just couldn't find the time and the quiet to meditate. Of course not, he said. You don't need to sit on a pillow when you hold your child or make a meal or take a walk in the woods. Do it openly, sweetly. That can be your meditation and where you find your peace. And to this day, I take a daily constitutional. Myron found his life's work as an intuitive guide and mentor for those of us eager to develop our spiritual gifts. Talented, sophisticated, educated, and expansive as he was, as Jason said, he challenged himself further by hiking to the 21,000-foot base camp of Mount Everest in 1994. Not long after Everest, he called to say, "I have to talk to you." We invited him for lunch, and as the children drifted from the table, he informed us he was gay. The news didn't surprise us, but when he asked us if we would allow him to still be with our children, we realized what a huge confession that was for him. We said, "Of course, Myron," and we piled all the kids into the car and went down to see Roger Rabbit in Denver. With the new millennium, Myron and Lawrence found true love. And Lawrence, yeah, I wish I had my bell. And Lawrence relocated to Myron's Fox Street home. As his love letter to Myron, Lawrence planted a magical garden, a secret garden, with flowers and foliage, surprise fountains and sculptures peeking through the green on meandering paths. Seeing a like mind, the tribe welcomed Lawrence in. For 15 years, Myron and Lawrence shared the principles of mysticism at their mystical musings gatherings, teaching us that we can have a direct experience with the divine. A savior or a church or a guru, these are all fine, but if we want a personal relationship with God, what we really need is to open our hearts and our minds. Myron was invited to speak at Princeton, of all places, also Bucknell and Esalen and goodness knows where else. When I told him I was seeing paradoxes in just about everything, he smiled. "That's a signal of spiritual maturity, Peg. I'm so happy for you." Without saying so, it was obvious that he had been liking life's paradoxes for a very long time. Our tribal vicar married Megan and Omar in 2012, right here. Well, over in Alderfer with a reception here. When they shared rings, he observed that wedding rings are circles. A circle never ends, and neither does love. absolutely brilliant. At their reception here at the lake house, we all went outside to view a solar eclipse. In his black cowboy hat, his royal purple bow tie, his solar shades, and a white pashmina, Myron was right where he belonged. As I was recovering from cancer treatment, Myron played a private concert for Gabe and Victoria and me. His sacred sound permeated my fragile, bald body and made me feel like a tuning fork dialed directly into the divine. I am a 10-year survivor today and believe that crucial concert helped to remind me how much I love living and loving, and that I had a lot left to do in this life. Time passed, and the years made their claim on us. Myron's eyesight deteriorated. Arthritis kept him from playing the piano. Mystical musings came to an end. His balance was unsteady, but he and Lawrence continued seeing clients. Lawrence took on more and more responsibility and made himself the expert on all things Myron. Myron relaxed into his exquisite care. And even in his final days, after 25 years together, he was quick to express his love and appreciation for Lawrence, always with that sublime smile of his. Myron's health continued to decline. He was weak, in a lot of pain, had pneumonia 4 times. And amazingly, despite it all, he was cheerful and dignified. The last time we saw him in rehab, shortly before he passed, he was in a wheelchair with an oxygen cannula on his nose, and he and Lawrence were doing everything they could to get him home. How are you, Myron? Very well, now that you're here. Always graceful, always upbeat. Despite his circumstances, always finding his way into feeling goodness. He did get home, and Lawrence called to say between tears, "We have a week." But it was sooner than that. Our son Gabe drove 7 hours straight to Fox Street, arriving shortly before Myron passed peacefully, with Lawrence on one side, Libby on the other, Gabe at his head, and 3 beloveds on 3 telephones. Megan and Omar arrived 20 minutes later. Together, they released him into the arms of love. Fare thee well, my radical, reverent friend. You dwell in the eternal now, and no doubt you are right at home. I'm so grateful to you, Myron, for the wise, gentle, accepting example you set, for teaching me a new way of being, and that the craziness and chaos in the world do not determine what happens inside of me. I do. Thank you for showing me that wherever you are, whatever you are doing, God holds you in the palm of his hand, and goodness surrounds us like the sky. Now, what will follow is an original piece by Myron. It's entitled Mystery and Wonder.
course, the tears come in the music, because they touch us where the words can't go. I've been asked to stand here in two capacities, to speak both as a pastor and as a nephew, both of which I'm honored to do, and each of which I find utterly daunting. Because to me, Myron was a giant. And at the same time, shouldn't surprise him. At the same time, he was utterly relatable. He could hang with anyone intellectually, spiritually, culturally, socially, and he could hang out with anyone as well. Whether a celebrity in some far off and exotic place, or on a simple front porch with a neighbor from across the street from the home he grew up in West Virginia. And with no pretense, he was a beautiful paradox in that way. And so even as a pastor, I wonder how someone can dare to speak of spiritual things at a gathering honoring such a master. But there is a quote I love, and it says this: "I am a hole in a flute that the Christ's breath moves through. Listen to this music. I am a hole in a flute that the Christ's breath moves through. Listen to this music." If Jesus showed us anything, it was how to be a vessel for a greater love, a divine love. I also love that quote in part because it doesn't belong to a Christian. It was uttered by the great Sufi poet Hafiz. And that too seems fitting to me for Myron. He grew up in this strong Christian home of a certain tradition. He went on to deep religious and spiritual study, and yet his understanding and spiritual practice just kept expanding throughout his life. Not unlike, incidentally, Jesus, who was also always pushing the boundaries and pushing of the bounds on who and how much we could love. I think in his teaching and in his healing work with clients, he probably offered a beautiful paradox of challenge and tenderness. And of course, what makes this gathering sacred is not the particular creed to which any of us belongs, if we belong to one at all, but our common love and our common purpose to give thanks, to remember, to bless, and to support one another. And it's only right to select a quote for Myron that employs the metaphor of music. As you all know, I don't have to tell you, he was a prodigy identified early, as you've already heard, playing at church as a young child, the chapel at his military school. Well, I understand he got in trouble playing the Mickey Mouse theme as they processed in one day for worship. But I believe God has a sense of humor as well. He recorded and toured, performed, offering his gift of music as he and Lawrence shared in their mystical musings. And all throughout, something indeed divine flowed through Myron as an instrument. Even his laugh was musical. That last comment really belongs more to my experience as an uncle than my experience as a pastor, because I heard that laugh break up many a room. And as an uncle, I can say he was the coolest of my father's brothers, he was one of my two favorites. And I say that because I have to ride back to Denver with the other one. His laugh isn't bad either, frankly. And I have so many memories over the years of that entire side of the family gathering together at holidays. Myron would show up to West Virginia and bring with him the latest thing, blue-green algae shakes, new technological devices, leather pants. This was so exotic to a boy from Indiana. This uncle who could play music that could stagger you, cook gourmet food that would delight the taste buds. It was like having a movie star as an uncle. Now, I know I saw those gatherings through young eyes, but to me, they modeled what a family that loves each other should look like and should feel like, and everyone should be so blessed to have such a gift. But I guess you know that already. I grew up hearing stories of you, Jason. He loved you so much. Some of you who were at those gatherings are here. Alan, Libby, and later Lawrence, and more on you in a minute. But I remember us gathering around and playing games. There wasn't much else to do there. And Myron was everyone's first pick for Trivial Pursuit, with his only Achilles heel being sports. So my brother Doug would be drafted as his sidekick. And I really stand in for him today. For when my brother was a young adult and wandering and trying to find himself, he found himself literally at Myron's doorstep, and the door was swung open, and there he lived for a while. What generosity. And I stand here as well for my mother, Mary, and my father, Ed. I know my mother loved taking these long walks with Myron in West Virginia. There wasn't, again, much else to do. And there they would talk about life in the latest book they were reading. My father was the oldest of the three boys, and yet he said in a way he looked up to Myron. Again, he was a giant. So back to you, Lawrence. On behalf of the family, thank you. Thank you for being a good and loving partner, for getting Myron, for caring for him so deeply and so well. He loved you. We love you. And so we come to the point where we have to let him go, or maybe we don't have to let him go, but we ritually honor his death and bear witness to the ache of his absence, which occupies equal space as the celebration of his presence. Paradox. So I've been asked to offer a commendation when we symbolically release the deceased into the arms of the Eternal One, a God who doesn't know how to let go, who loves forever, just as Jesus has been trying to get us to do, love without bounds. And so, as is right for you, please join me in a moment of prayer. Holy One, into your care we release your beloved child, Myron McClellan. We give thanks for the particular form you took up in him. We let go of his body, but not his touch, his voice, but not his music, his breath, but never his song. And so we pause for just a moment, holding silence together. listening not only for the absence of his music, but perhaps for the faint refrain that echoes from beyond. And so we know, O God, that that music still plays within us and among us when we gather. And so I ask that you bless this holy moment in the name of the love made flesh, who I call Jesus the Christ. Amen.
Thank you. There are some lives that do not announce themselves with thunder, but enter like inviting music, already knowing the shape of the room, already listening to music that began when he was 4 years old. He came from the hills of West Virginia, where the land teaches a kind of remembering, of roots that hold, of kin who remain in the marrow of you. 2 brothers, Ed and wife Mary in Indiana, and Alan with us today, and his wife Becky in Virginia. 2 brothers beside him in that early story of a family not only lived with, but carried forward. And then that curious, unlikely chapter, military school, where discipline met a spirit that could and would never quite be contained by it. And somehow his spirit stayed, not as rigidity, but as a quiet backbone, a steadiness beneath the grace. Because grace is what followed. In his teaching, Ballroom Dance, where he taught not only steps, but how to welcome another into motion, how to say with a hand and a glance, a turning body, you belong here. This is how we belong. Twice married for 14 years each to Sonia, rest in peace, and to Libby, who is here today. Each chapter, a weaving of love in its time, in its truth. And from there too, a reaching outward to the high, thin air of Mount Everest, a place where breath itself becomes a question, and each step asks something deeper of the soul. A test not only of endurance, but of courage, of what it means to keep going when the path narrows and the world falls away beneath you. He went there, as he so often went in life, not to conquer, but to meet himself more fully. And always, always, community. Not as an idea, but as a lived devotion. He taught, but not in the way of instruction alone. He taught by presence, by the way he could meet you exactly where you were, and just as gently where you were not. There was in him that rare and sacred generosity, an unwavering acceptance of the unfinished, the uncertain, the beautifully human. And oh, the piano, the classically trained piano. He did not so much play as discover. Each improvisation, a small act of faith, notes arriving as if they had been waiting for his particular touch to bring them forward into the world. You could hear it, not performance, but conversation, not mastery alone, but wonder. And always, always, always the twinkle, that flash in his eyes that said life was not to be taken too tightly, that even wisdom could laugh, that play was not the opposite of depth, but one of its forms. He was brilliant, yes, but never at a distance. His wisdom did not tower, it leaned in. And then Lawrence, me. 25 years of shared days in the garden, shared breath, shared teaching, shared becoming. 25 years, and in gay years, that's 100. A love not hurried, but deepened, season by season, gesture by gesture, until it became not two lives side by side, but one field of presence in which both of us could fully be Myron and Lawrence. He was grateful, so deeply grateful for the fullness of his life. Myron and I have loved a Zen story about the courage and fullness of life, a story we hadn't shared together for a couple of years, about a monk running from a tiger, jumping over a cliff to escape, grasping a fraying root, noticing the bear below and the strawberry beside, plucking the strawberry into his mouth with a mmm. 2 days before he passed away, our beloved Myron was not eating much, but asked for a strawberry, which I am so happy to say I happened to have picked up the day before. And upon tasting, with his own death impending, he was still living life so fully, courageously daring to be in the present moment without any complaints, ever. Without anger, with acceptance and deep appreciation, being still and still moving. He was deeply grateful for the fullness of his life. amid the opportunity to offer his services for the mentees, the students, the clients, the many who came to him seeking something they could not always name. And he met them there again and again with kindness, with gentleness, with that quiet nobility that does not declare itself, but is known in how one stands when the standing is hardest, even in suffering. And he suffered greatly up until near the end. And with his great suffering, there was dignity, a steadiness, a refusal to close the heart. And at the end, as it should be, as one hopes for but cannot command, he was home, surrounded, held, carried by the hands unseen and seen, by love, by what some call angels, and all that had gathered around him through a life so fully given. And so, what remains? Not absence, not silence, but music, still moving through us, still finding its way into our days, our gestures, our remembering, a twinkle caught now in our own eyes, a kindness echoed forward, a note still sounding. He has not left the room entirely, only changed the way he's present. And we who were shaped by him, we who were seen, welcomed, taught, loved, we are now part of his continuing. And if we listen, if we really listen, we may yet hear an ongoing, quiet improvisation. "'Tis a fearful thing, 'tis a fearful thing to love what death can touch. A fearful thing to love, to hope, to dream, to be. To be, and oh, to lose. A thing for fools, this, and a holy thing to love. For your life has lived in me. Your laugh once lifted me. Your word was gift to me. To remember this brings painful joy. 'Tis a human thing, love, and a holy thing. A holy thing to love what death has touched. Maybe in the end, it is wiser to surrender before the miraculous scope of human generosity. For as long as we have voices, we just keep saying, thank you, thank you, thank you.
We're going to go ahead and serve the strawberries, chocolates, and champagne. While they're serving, got a few other remarks, and then we'll wait to the toast. But does anyone else who's here want to say anything about Myron? Oh, wonderful. Please. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Megan. Mm. One of the things that Myron taught me was about how to be with pain. Myron was someone, especially towards the end of his life, who lived in a lot of pain in his body. And as I was listening to your flute, Victoria, this came through just now, and I want to offer this from Myron to us. It is by becoming bound that we truly know freedom. Let the bindings of this world shape your body, shape your life. Let the freedoms ring through the spaces that will never submit. to the bonds of this life. So I honor just as Myron did for each of us in our lives as our teacher, the way that he was able to bring unconditional love into the most challenging places, the way that he was able to shine brightly. Omar and I went and visited Myron and Lawrence just a few days on, it was Valentine's Day, and he had just come home from the hospital, the nursing facility. And I said, "How are you doing?" He said, "I'm doing great. And I think I look pretty good too, don't I?" And it was just such an emulation of his radiance that just, even through all of it, he was so bright and full of love. And there was nothing that could stop that love. And I feel that even in his death, there is nothing that can stop that love.
My name's Haven. And I just wanted to say one thing that occurred to me now. There's so many things that Myron said that stick in my head. There's so many things that Myron said to me over 30 years that stay in my head. But one came to me now more than anything else, which I say to myself all the time. And I always picture him when I say it. And he's probably said it to so many people here. And that is, but it's not just what he said, it's the way he would say it when he'd be sitting in that very sacred room. And he said to me, "Haven, it's all perfect. Beyond your wildest imagination."
Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara. And I have just something very short that I want to say that Myron embodied. It seems to me in life we get two choices. We can be a stumbling block or a stepping stone. And Myron was always a stepping stone. Now, I also noted that we're going to get stepped on either way. And when Myron got to the pearly gates, and St. Peter and all the archangels were standing there, and I know that St. Peter looked at him and said, "Congratulations, my servant. It was a job well done."
Hello, everybody. My name is Juliet. I know 4 people in this room. I know Lawrence. I know Willie Matthews, who introduced himself to me at the beginning of this service. And I know Steve, who I think I saw earlier. Hello, Steve. I am a nurse at Advent Health Porter. I met Myron last fall during one of his admissions on my unit. He changed my life in the cumulative 20 hours I spent with him. This ceremony has been the most incredible celebration of him. In those 20 hours, every second that I wasn't with another patient, who everyone was completely fine the whole time, I would go and spend with Lawrence and Myron in their room, asking every single question I could possibly think of. And I really asked everything. I heard about Princeton. I heard about the garden. I heard about their adventures abroad in Everest and Myron's love of chocolate, which I share wholeheartedly. I heard about mysticism and was, for lack of a better word, converted in that conversation. And went home that shift with a few book recommendations from Myron as well. It is so evident how incredible of a soul Myron was and how he has touched every single person in this room and so many beyond. Again, with the even short time that I knew Myron and that I have known Lawrence, I feel lucky to have met the two incredible people who had a beautiful 25 years together. I asked many questions about their love as well. It's just the most incredible thing to me. I had no plan to come up and say anything, if you can't tell, but I'm glad I did, because Myron deserves every accolade he could possibly receive. That is all I have to say.
Thank you so much. I think we're about there. Strawberries and chocolate are really good with bubbles if you haven't had that before, but you want to make the most of it. Did we get everybody? I've tried to think of the number of people in my life who've had a strong influence, and I can name them on one hand, and I think the person who had the most influence, certainly in the last 19 years, is Myron. And Myron, I think we all feel like Myron was one of our best friends, but for some of us, he was our best friend. And again, his superpower was love. And I would like to propose a toast to Myron, who was our best friend, certainly my best friend. And just want to say, Myron, I know you see us from whatever that dimension is. We love you. Lawrence? And it meets with Lawrence's approval, and that's a high bar, by the way. Beautiful.
Cheers. Thank you, Mark.
Okay. We all made it through, and what a love fest this was, but entirely appropriate for Myron. Lawrence, you want to say anything else before we?
Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. And please, we have a wonderful buffet line. Help yourself. It's in the Octagon Room